DOJ dropping charges against SBF. Unlawful campaign contributions? Question everything. Trust nothing. Welcome to Debate Crypto. It's your boy, CryptoKeeper, here for another episode of TA Thursday, and we've got two legends on the show. We wouldn't do you any differently. Kicking it off, been a little while since he's been on the show. My boy, Gareth Soloway. Gareth, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. Been so busy with this market and not just crypto. You know, I do commodities and stocks, so it's been wild out there. But thanks for having me back.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for coming on. I'm actually excited to talk some legacy stuff with you today. So stick around. If you're not just here for crypto, we're going to talk some legacy too. And then the legend himself, Magic Internet Money. Magic, what's good?
Oh, man, just feeling bright and beautiful today, so it's going to be a good day to talk charts.
Best outfit on the show award goes to Magic Internet Money today with the dad fit. Love it. I like it. I like it. I like it. We're going to have some fun today. Hey, if you haven't already, smash the likes. We've got Gareth and Magic's information down below, so make sure to follow them. They're working hard for you. We are going to get into a little bit of politics today, have a little fun with that. We won't go too hard. We got to keep the YouTube overlords, at bay, but we're going to dive into crypto. We're going to dive into legacy. We're going to do our thing. So let's kick it off. First of all, let me jump into the chat. The first person to comment, I hesitated to call you out on here, brother, but we're going to do it. You were first. Benny Blanco coming with the negativity to start the day. So Benny Blanco, what's up, brother? Glad that you're here. Richard Berry in the house and A1. Good to see you guys. All right, cool. Let's start off with the markets. Let's see what's cracking off over there. And, well, we don't need to look at WorldCoin. One moment, please. Drum roll. Maybe. There we go. All right. So the global crypto market cap is at 1.18 trillion with the T dollars. That's down 0.4%. Bitcoin. What are we doing with Bitcoin? Oh, what do you know? Just under 30K at 29,122. I think Magic is going to break down for us what he's thinking about that here in a few minutes. ETH at 1858. Again, pretty flat, down 0.5% or so. Rolling down through the top 10, not much movement. You guys know this game. If Bitcoin's not moving, not much of anything else is moving. So that's where we're at. We're going to find out why in a minute, but I want to start off actually a little bit differently today. Gareth, I want to talk about something really important. I want to talk about the dollar, right? There has always been this inverse relationship with the dollar versus Bitcoin, okay? The DXY, talk to me about what's going on with the DXY. And then what do you think about this inverse relationship with the dollar versus Bitcoin? Because there are some sources that are saying that relationship is starting to soften. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think at least in the near term, it does seem there's this divergence that we've seen with Bitcoin away not only from the dollar, but specifically even the stock market, right? So we've seen such amazing runs in NVIDIA stock and Microsoft and everything, and Bitcoin's been stuck. And even with good news, right? We've heard the BlackRock news, we heard the XRP news, and Bitcoin still couldn't get out of its own way in terms of breaking out above 31,000. Now, 31,000 epic level of resistance. I've talked about that for the last couple months, and it's literally been hanging out there for a few months at this point. If I show my screen here, I don't know if we can pop it up.
Yep.
But here's your dollar chart. And what I find fascinating about this is, so number one, look at the pattern, right? We had the big fall. We hit this line. We bounced. We then broke the line. We came to the next line. We then bounced back to the former line, came down, bounced one more time, broke. And so what the chart's telling me is that we're likely headed back to this level on the US dollar, 102.45, 102.40, whatever you want to call it right there. That would be what I would call a retrace to the scene of the crime, which is exactly what happened here, right? We broke this white line, we came down to the next one, then we retraced to that former line. Now, what's interesting about today's price action is yesterday Jerome Powell came out, and you could argue he was a little bit more dovish on his statements. That generally means a weaker dollar. And early today, we saw a weaker dollar, but there has been a huge reversal in the dollar right now, and we are screaming higher. Now, I'm hearing from my little birds that I listen to that this could have something to do with Japan, they're talking about potentially taking away the peg, the yield curve control that they've had for, I mean, how many generations they've had this, since the 80s or whenever they had it. But that's a big deal here.
Explain that to me a little bit further, Gareth, for those that don't understand what you're saying.
So Japan's basically locked in interest rates at zero for decades at this point, right? And so they're seeing a huge surge in inflation, which is forcing their hand to say, oh my goodness, to get inflation under control, we may have to loosen that. And that changes the whole dynamic with currencies, with assets in general, because again, it's something the markets have been used to for so long. It was always something you could bank on, and now it potentially is going to switch.
Wow.
Tomorrow morning, we'll hear from the Japanese central bank on this.
And how does the Japanese central bank, is it just worldwide commodities trading that really like drives that, or why is that going to be so important for the United States?
Yeah, so it's important because of the dollar in relation to the dollar. If they loosen their yields and let their interest rates float up, that changes the whole dynamic with their currency and with the U.S. dollar. Magic might have some insights on this as well. But there's been so many different trades that have been established that you trade, the disparity in the yen versus the dollar and so forth. Contango is a big term that you hear with it. And yeah, anyways, it's actually pretty shocking. In fact, I want to show you one more thing on my chart here. This is actually remarkable. Take a look at what's going on to the S&P. So the S&P was soaring today, and then look at this.
Wah, wah.
Right? Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about a move from 459 on the spiders down to 452. You don't see moves like that usually on the S&P intraday. That is a huge move, and that tells you this is a big deal to the markets. And what I find fascinating about it is if we go to the daily chart, there's this trend line going back here, this channel, in fact, from the lows connected to the lows and parallel to these highs here, and look at where that reversal is coming in. And that, at least in technicals, and Magic can tell you, when you get a candle like that, which is basically engulfing the previous multiple candles, that's never a good thing technically, especially when it comes with huge amount of volume.
Do you have anything behind, Gareth, why you think that might have happened today? Is it because of yesterday's Fed meeting, or is there something more to it?
Just that, I mean, the central bank, so the Fed meeting for the U.S., the equivalent is tomorrow morning for the Japanese central bank. And so I don't know why it slipped out early, but someone leaked this news out, and we'll see if it's true tomorrow. Most likely will be, but something's leaking out here, and the markets are freaking out a little bit about it.
I think it's incredible. Before I ever got into, so I started in stocks before I merged my way over into crypto and then just dove head and hands into crypto. But I think it's really interesting how exactly what you're talking about, that Japan uses the yen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how something like another currency all the way across the world can have so much impact on our markets over here. And it does show you how much things interconnected matter. And the reason I'm saying that is because there is a lot going on as it relates to the dollar, and people trying to back away from the dollar. And people ask, like, well, why is it such a big deal? Well, ultimately, as the global reserve status, which we have as of right now, which looks like I don't know how long we're going to hold that. That is the number. That's it, right? We are in power partially because of that. Obviously, our military as well. But I think it's going to be interesting as we see more and more countries kind of stepping back from the dollar to see what happens. It's kind of a scary thing. It gets us into the CBDCs without me diving into that. There is a lot happening, and you need to watch the worldwide stage. That's part of the reason you should definitely continue to pay attention to Gareth. Gareth, great analysis, brother. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, man. And I just want to say, I just was reading the other day how more and more countries are starting to adopt the digital yuan as a currency to do trading in, so or to back and forth to trade in. So yeah, it's happening. Again, just everyone for the record, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be like, oh, no one's using the dollar anymore. It's still the main currency, but it's something that over 10, 15 years probably does change. Yeah,
and I think it's also interesting that we're seeing these countries that we'll say the yuan as an example, they're starting to go back to old school traditional ways. They're saying, hey, we need to back this with something. We need to back this with gold. Is Bitcoin an option? Obviously, a lot of us would love to see that, but they're looking at commodities to say, hey, this is the value stacked behind and supporting our money. And so I think it'll be really cool to see if we could get back to an idea like that. I think after fiat currency came, that was kind of it, because being able to flip the printer on and just make the wild changes that they're able to make makes things easier for them. But we will continue to pay attention, and we'll keep reporting to each and every one of you what we see in the markets. Make sure to smash the like if you haven't already. And just a reminder, make sure you're following these guys. All right, so Magic. A lot of people are on here for the cryptocurrencies. Talk to me about Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been playing around with this 30K number for quite a bit of time. And I've been around. I've seen it play with 10K for a while. I've seen it play with 6K, 14K, 20K, 25. I mean, there's been a lot of numbers, but it's been flirting with this 30K. Show me on the charts, what is this telling us like right now? And what could it tell us about, I don't know, short to midterm?
Yeah. I was going to piggyback a little bit off of what Gareth said about the DXY and SPX a little bit here.
Yeah, sure.
In terms of the DXY specifically, I don't really correlation trade markets too much. I generally just go with the technicals. And this is one of those things where I've been watching this range develop. It expanded into some targets over the summer that we talked about on the show when they came in. Now you're looking at the back test of the range. If anyone's truly going to be bearish on the DXY, you're going to have to see monthly closures below these two breaker levels that we've had marked out. These are essentially just monthly lows from 2022 as you were establishing your breakout. This is
what are those, around $100, $101, something like that?
Yeah, so 101.64 and 101.297, and then the big level that Gareth actually talked about is, I think he called it returning to the scene of the crime, is actually an interesting level because it is a 12-month level for me. So it's a really big one that established that giant range we just looked at. And if you were to pull up the fib retracement, it's also your local gold pocket. So for me, that's an area of inflection. It's a really big macro level as well. It lines up with his TA, with the lines that he's got on his chart and the pattern. So always good to see that type of stuff. So we'll see what we get out of that 102. I call it 102.21 is about where I'm looking at. So and then the SPX, we talk about time all the time. This has been the time frame. Actually, last week was when I was looking for the move. But in terms of symmetry in the markets, you had a really, really nice symmetrical pattern here as he was looking at in a channel. Also another thing that works off of symmetry. So time is definitely kind of pointing to that. Am I saying you should be shorting the market? Not necessarily, but I would say that if you're in risk on positions and leveraged, especially, that you may consider deleveraging a little bit.
We're going to be talking about some of that here in just a little bit for sure.
But in terms of Bitcoin, very simple. I believe it's actually on this one I want to be on. I've been looking at this chart from a very high time frame point of view for quite some time. The main reason being is, again, we came into macro time for me, and the cycle was saying between July 10th and the 23rd, I'm looking for a pivot in the market, especially if we got that extended rally past February. So this has been the time frame, and you got another symmetrical move. Now we've come into a statistical target here at the quarterly pivot, which is, they hit over 70%. So you think, all right, I've got a really good rejection here. Why wouldn't I come down and tag this, which you have perfectly? Now the question becomes, I run other statistics on harmonics, and the B leg is my target for this one. And it hits at a very high rate. So I'm still looking for another low to be made because there's been no sign of strength. So when you were talking about 30K specifically, there is a pretty easy way just to look at it just from a charting standpoint without getting too deep in the weeds in terms of like volume profile and all that stuff. You can just go on here and you can say, okay, things don't look good on the weekly. Here is my current week open at 30,066, and I'll make this a little bit brighter. There we go. And then we could go ahead and just mark off the previous week open as well. And these two things right here are going to get things very well. You can see that above here is good. Above this little box, very good. Below this box, well, you're going to start challenging into these lows, seeking out that liquidity, looking for buyers. And if those buyers are not showing up, then, well, it's just going to continue until it finds them. And so for me, knowing the statistics of what's going on, looking at this as an overall range, I'm still looking for about 28,450, 450. And I have no reason to believe otherwise until maybe we start living daily candles above the previous week low here, which is right here at 29,272. So locally, that's going to be kind of a battleground, I think, going into the end of the week. If it can get above that level and hold on to it and base off of it, we could see that back test into this 30K region. And that's really going to be still an inflection point. It would get people very excited, just like it did previously over here. All these wicks, as you can see, those are people getting trapped in their positions, unfortunately. And this is going to be just that big, big level. You get back above this, I don't think there's any reason why you shouldn't be targeting 31K and maybe higher. However, that's, it's an if then statement. You know, you have to go with what the chart's telling you. And right now, the chart has not given you any signs of strength.
Yeah, it seemed like to me, Magic, just from a simplistic standpoint, without even looking at a ton of TA, 30K was a big whole number. And what kept happening? We kept either touching it, bouncing off, and then coming back to it. And what I've learned from you guys is that when you continue to test a number over and over and over, if you're testing it to the downside and you keep tapping it, at some point you usually fall through it. And that's what we saw happen. Once we busted through, then we kept tapping it. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I love seeing, dude, some of your targets, Gareth, same thing, have been like so spot on from the TA. You guys have actually over time made me more and more of a believer in TA versus just, you know, purely fundamentals. It's a fun thing to watch. So we'll see what plays out, what shakes out. But yeah, that 30K number has been, you know, been a bear, so to speak. Gareth, one of the things that I've been hearing, and I hear it all over the place, you hear it on TikTok, you hear it on YouTube, we're hearing it all over the place, or at least I've heard people suggesting it. I have not heard you say this, but I'm interested to get your thoughts. I've been talking about and hearing about market crash, like an imminent stock market crash. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you believe that we do have a big crash coming? Do you agree with it? Talk to me about it.
So it's really interesting. So generally bear markets, that's rare, right? If you look at 2008 and 9, it was a stair step down that then as we got lower, it got faster and nastier and panic set in and so forth. Yeah. Usually the panic is at the end is when it flushes. However, having said that, just as of yesterday, the Dow had its 13th up day in a row. The last time that happened was in 1987. We know what happened in 1987. The stock market had a crash. I also think that there's some concerning things out there about zero-day options. Zero-day options are now the biggest volume factor within the options market. And
what's a zero-day option?
Zero-day options are basically where people say, this option is going to expire today. I'm going to bet whether this stock goes up or down. And literally, I'll either be at zero. My account, my option will be worth zero today, or it'll be worth a lot.
Is it at the tail end of the option, or is it you're going into a fresh trade on the day?
Yeah, they have literally zero-day options now that are on that day. So this is taken over. But the negative is, I was seeing stats on this, is that as long as the markets are hanging in there, it's fine. But the problem is, if you get a market where all of a sudden people start doing a lot of puts, it can actually create a crash scenario. So back in, I think it was 2000, Magic, you might remember, but the stock market had a flash crash back. I think it was like 2013. That was a scenario where everyone's like, oh my goodness, we have to be careful. We have to put these barriers in the market so it can't happen. Well, things have loosened now, and now you have these zero-day options, which can create that. Now, again, it's not my forefront scenario of happening. It's more, for me, it's more, a pullback. Buyers are conditioned to buy the dip because the Fed always saves us, and that's what's worked for the last many years. And then eventually they'll be disappointed, and as we flush again, another buy the dip, and eventually it doesn't work at all, and we'll see the culmination of a big down move. But the other stat too that I find fascinating. So today, puts are an option that basically you're betting the market will go down. The premium or the cost to buy that protection or to bet the market is going down is the lowest it's been since 2008. And we know what happened in 2008 and 2009. The other thing that's fascinating, in 2008, Ben Bernanke, the Fed chair at the time, came out and said, hey guys, we think the economy is going to slow, but there won't be a recession. We're going to avoid a recession. Well, just yesterday, we had Jerome Powell saying the same exact thing. And to see that that put options, the price of them is the lowest point since 2008. I mean, you can't help but start to connect the dots a little bit. And it is making me nervous about this market.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, also the other thing, I've seen a bunch of headlines about, BlackRock saying, well, a good one that I saw was BlackRock saying that they're looking for 2,800% returns on AMC from where they are right now. Right. And that seems insane to me. Obviously, those are insane returns in any market. But B, you do have to question when they say one thing, it's usually has some sort of a motivation behind it. I do understand why Jerome Powell doesn't come out. We talked about this with CryptoFace one time he was on here. I do understand why he doesn't just come out and say, hey, we're screwed. That's it. It's over. Pack it up. Because ultimately you are going to create more fear than maybe needs to be there. So I understand the idea of him trying to, you know, rub your back a little bit, tell you everything's going to be okay. It's just like your parents do when they know something's bad coming, but they, you know, want to kind of make you feel a little better about it. But what I don't like is I think that some of the verbiage is intended to be deceptive when they know it's deceptive, and that's what I don't like. I don't like how they ultimately show you inflation numbers and how they manipulate those numbers. They'll leave energy out. What's the so they leave energy and
food energy is core, right?
Off of core inflation. Well, I would think that those would be some really important things because on a daily basis, we need
that's what Americans and pretty much the world spends most of their money on, that and housing, right?
Yeah. So
by the way, another crazy stat on housing is that we're now at a point where people are spending 40% of their income on housing. That's the highest it's ever been in history. And so again, you know, you look at inflation, what it's done to food and energy, and then you look at how much people are spending, and it's no surprise that credit card debt is now at $1 trillion for U.S. consumers. I mean, it's unsustainable, which makes me nervous. You know, it doesn't mean the markets are going to crash tomorrow or next week or next month, but there's going to be a reckoning day. And by the way, that's throwing into account that we're approaching a point where just in interest payments, we're paying $1 trillion a year in interest.
That's disgusting. I don't think people have an appreciation for what $1 trillion is. I don't think because it gets thrown around like $1 billion, for example, a billionaire. I think people don't grasp the fact that it is $1 million 1,000 times over to get to $1 billion. Now you've got 1,001 billions to get to $1 trillion. I don't think people really grasp that. They hear $1 trillion and it's, oh yeah, it's a ton of money. But to actually grasp how large that number is, it's insane. It is massive. So let's smash those likes. We got 86 people in here. Thank you all for being here. You can be anywhere, but you're hanging out with Debate Crypto. Make sure to follow Gareth. Make sure to follow Magic. We appreciate you guys for being here. Let me jump into the chat real quick. I want to touch this comment real quick. This said, what has to change for Gareth to think that there's no recession? What are your thoughts?
It's a good question. So one of the things I'm keeping an eye on, this is why I'm not a believer that there's going to be a soft landing. So one of the things to realize is that the Fed has never in their history had a soft landing or a perfect landing. So going somehow this time is going to be different is a little bit, I mean, again, that's like betting that your one horse out of 100 is going to win the race. Yep. Maybe it does, but it's a rarity. So the other thing that I would say for me is watching the jobs data and understanding the lag impact of Federal Reserve monetary policy. So we know that there's about a 6 to 12 month lag in interest rates and when they hit the economy. So if, let's say from now, let's say the Fed finished raising as of yesterday. Okay. If in 12 months we aren't in a recession, then I think you said at that point, all right, well, we avoided it. But you have to let that lag catch up, because if you go back 12 months, I mean, where were we on interest rates? I mean, halfway through, not even halfway through. So there's a lot for this economy to absorb. And then you look at things like home prices, which are starting to pop up. You look at energy prices that are starting to pop up. These components of inflation where everyone was celebrating the last CPI data, and now oil's up 15% in the last month. Gasoline's up 15 to 20%. Food and energy are all rising. And to me, that's saying, inflation's beginning to creep up a little bit. How is the Fed going to cut rates if we get into trouble? So to summarize again, it's in, let's say 6 to 12 months. If we're not at a recession yet, then I think we're past the point where it would happen.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that. And it's the numbers thing. When they tell you that inflation is at 3%, what they're not explaining to you is that it still means that we're 3%. If the number is true, it still means that we're 3% higher from where we were the month before. You know what I'm saying? Like still, this number is getting higher and higher and higher. And you wonder, I can't think of anything that I could go to the store for right now that isn't a minimum of 25% more expensive. And I'm just saying across the board. And that's just like a minimum. We see things that are absolutely, skyrocketing. And so
then I think just what I mentioned before about how much people are spending on housing at this point, how much they're spending on food, like you're saying, and to think that somehow the economy is going to be okay and people aren't going to at some point be like, holy crap, my credit card is cutting me off. I've spent too much and so forth. I think for me, I'm just a skeptic, and it's more so driven at least by data versus just arbitrary thought.
Yeah, and I don't think that it needs to be a fear thing for those of you watching. It's not about fear, it's about reality. The reality is what Gareth's saying is correct. Food is up. Home prices are up. Interest rates are up. Things are getting more and more difficult. Credit tightening, right? It's much harder to get credit at this point than it was even a year ago. All of these factors play into how simple is it for you to operate your daily life. Most people do have a bunch of credit card debt, and it does help them kind of, tag along and kind of keep up with whatever they're trying to keep up with. As those conditions tighten, it gets more difficult for them, and they also have more to pay off because the interest rates are freaking higher. It's really simple.
That's the key right there, is that if you look at what they were paying, like let's say they were making their minimum payment prior, but interest rates when they were low, let's say it was 15% on their credit card. Well, now that credit card's charging them 20%. Yep. And so that bill is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's unsustainable for them to be able to pay it off if they're just paying the minimum.
So I got to tell you, sorry, Magic, just real quick. With my construction company, I try to keep as little debt as humanly possible, but I was taught that using other people's money for certain things is very appropriate. And so I have a small business loan. And when I got the small business loan, it was at 4.5%, and it was about a year ago. Okay. It's all the way, the number has jumped all the way up to 8.5% as the federal funds rate as that line continued to move. And I got to tell you, the minimum payment on there, which obviously, not financial advice, but you definitely want to pay more. That minimum payment has grown, drastically. And so it affects everybody from the top down. The business owners that have these, loans that need to be paid off have to charge more money so that they can keep up. And then the homeowner, if they're buying something from that person, has to spend more on not just the materials, but also the work being done.
And one of the things that you're starting to see is I don't know how many people are seeing like car loans, but now they have I think Tesla was even talking about debuting a 10-year car loan or a 12-year car loan, right? Yep. And it's getting to that point where people can't afford monthly payments on the cars, so they gotta stretch out those payments another 5 years or so.
They're gonna own you forever. That is the point. Magic, what were you? I didn't mean to cut you off, Magic. What were you about
it's all good. I was trying to remember, but I think the last time we had reached levels of credit card utilization and things like that was in the housing crisis era, was 2006. And so it took years, kind of like Gareth was saying, for these things to eventually catch up, because they just keep making the minimum until they can't make the minimum anymore, and that's when things really start to topple over. So I get it. The fundamentals of that aspect do matter, because you can't change math, and unless people get individual money printers, it's one of those things where
they can't all be the Fed, unfortunately.
Yeah, individual money printers, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, totally illegal. Not promoting that on the show at all. Promise, YouTube, not promoting that. So let me ask you, Magic. There's a lot of people on here that obviously it's TA Thursday. They want to learn about trading. So people that are actively, let's say people that have been actively trading, or people that are just kind of getting into trading, looking at the overall current market conditions, tell me, how would you assess the market as it relates to trading? Are there any little tips, tricks, or anything that you really pay attention to right now?
You've really got to establish what kind of a trader you're going to be, whether that's a short term or a medium term, because that's going to really dictate your strategy going forward. If it's a short term, it's business as usual. If you're in and out of the markets every day, you're not holding positions. It really doesn't affect you much. You just need to find a strategy that works and then really hammer that home. It doesn't have to be my strategy or Gareth's. You just need something that prints money, and then you need to use that until those, that money stops printing, basically. Yeah. If it's a medium or long term, I do think that you kind of have to shift a little bit here, just because, there's been some pretty momentous rallies. That doesn't mean that it can't continue to rally. However, we know that pullbacks do happen. And I would exercise patience rather than just aping into these positions. That would be the biggest thing. And I know that we preach that all the time, but I think it's more important now when you're at an inflection point in the market that you exercise some patience, let the market show you its hand first. And then you can go ahead and, feel the need to put some risk on potentially if it's appropriate, depending on what you're doing. But I'm still holding my longs from 16.6. I haven't closed any of those. So, I'm still exposed long, but just from a vantage point for me that I know that I can, hang on to this position a little bit less risk-free. I've definitely taken profits out of the market by deleveraging, as I've said. Like, so if you're in leveraged positions, definitely, consider, especially if they're longs right now, deleverage a little bit. Doesn't mean you have to sell your assets. Just means, don't lose them at the same time. That's never fun. And you can always up the leverage when it's appropriate. When the market's booming and it's going straight up, it's
juice it, baby.
Dude, those are like when those like little runs happen, you can make so much money easily. And that's when the easy money stops, is when people, like right now, we just had a huge run up. You're potentially stalling out at major resistance on Bitcoin, for instance. It needs to push through that level. And if it doesn't, you have to kind of come to terms with yourself and say, okay, where's the best value and potential for me to actually take advantage of any kind of a pullback? And if you can't do that, you might sit down with yourself and say, hey, I need a better strategy, whether that's learning something new or just reevaluate what you're doing and maybe tweaking it a little bit.
Reevaluating how you're actively trading. Now, that's good stuff. I had never really analyzed before hearing actually you say that a while ago. What kind of a trader am I going to be when I'm trading? And ultimately what I figured out is that for me, when I do trade, it's a swing trade. And why? Well, I'm not actively sitting at my desk all day long. I can't be in and out, in and out, in and out. And so just because of my pure lifestyle, if and when I'm trading, that's what it is for me. And that's literally just purely lifestyle driven.
I've thought about you in trading quite a bit, because you do trade a little bit different than I do. Because I can go from day-to-day trading, just, trading 4 or 5 times a day on the same asset, even, to, trading twice a week. And you've told me you've aped into some positions, and I was going to give you some advice that, what you should do is, if you are tracking these, is get your set of rules and say, okay, how many of my losses were because I didn't follow my rule set? And how many were due to the fact that I followed my rules, but it was just a loss? And if you take out the ones where you didn't follow your rules, are you profitable? Does it make sense? And that then you have true data, like that'd be one thing. If you guys are evaluating yourself and you're saying, I can't trade this market right now, maybe go back through and reevaluate what you've been doing and say, okay, these were my rules. Did I follow them? No. It's a great time to reflect.
And that's why, Magic, when you're talking about that, that's why you said journaling is so important, because I can't remember what I had for freaking lunch yesterday. So I need to do that if I'm going to be trading more and more, so that I can look back and say, okay, this is what I did here. This is what I did here. That's just for me. But I think that's part of the reason why that journaling helps you point out, hey, I missed here. I didn't do this. I did do that.
Just like budgeting, man. You're probably going to end up in debt if you don't budget, right?
Yeah. Nope.
You've got a budget.
For sure.
Set yourself up for success.
Gareth, so we keep talking about, the recession, things crashing, blah, 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 blah. I think it was you that had been talking about somewhere around like a 10K Bitcoin. So I'm actually going to pull up, because this runs nicely with it. I want to pull up this comment. Thanks, Parrish, for tossing this out here. It said, if when recession hits, can we see Bitcoin around sub 12K? Thanks. And like I said, I think it was you that was talking some pretty low numbers like that. Are you still holding on to that thesis, or what are your thoughts?
I am, and I think the setup is honestly a little bit more clear now, where it's not going to be, if we get down to, let's say, even 10 or 9,000. I think max pain. I mean, people talk about max pain. If we pierce 10,000, I could only imagine the craziness there.
Oh yeah.
But for me, it has nothing now to do with Bitcoin. If this happens, it is going to be a liquidity event, meaning that the stock market, and let's just take this for instance. Let's just say the stock market goes back to last October lows, which would be a drop, 20% down. Where is Bitcoin during that? All right. And what if we go even lower? I mean, in general, I would be surprised if we don't take out in a recession the October lows. And so I think, to be clear on this, is that I think the things are moving in the right direction for Bitcoin. The spot ETF kind of adoption by more countries, by institutions, and so forth. But it's all about that liquidity event, where if you see the stock market dropping 20-25% from here, we do probably get down and maybe test $10,000 or $9,000 on Bitcoin. So I do see that. I'll show you on my chart here real quick. So I've had this range. This is that 30 to 31 range. We can see that we did break it here. This is actually the beginnings of what I would refer to as a potential bear flag, which usually leads down. I know Magic, you guys are looking at that 28.4-ish level, which is this little pivot here for me. So I agree that's a little support. For me, the big level to watch in the overall picture of Bitcoin of whether it can go back up to 31 and break out in the near term, or it starts to head back to the lows, is this line right here. Beautiful, perfectly aligned trend line connecting all of the lows. And essentially it's an upsloping trend line or a line that is telling us about the trend on Bitcoin. So if we were to start trading below this, which is around 27,000, that's where I would start to get nervous that we're beginning that bigger move to the downside that could at least retest 15.7, the lows on Bitcoin.
I think, Gareth, that would be, it's scary, especially if you haven't been in crypto very long. But I will say, as someone that's, been in crypto for 6-7 years, whatever it's been now, the best decisions that I've ever made were to take those opportunities because I do believe long term in the asset that is Bitcoin. And so I would just challenge everyone. I've been talking about mainly just because of macroeconomic conditions, nothing to do with charts, macroeconomic conditions, that I still think we have a big move downward. And I can't point to what it's going to be. Is it going to be war? Is it going to be, like Gareth said, a liquidity crisis? I just still feel like we've got something coming. And so, if you're prepared, then you have a game plan. And if that's part of your game plan, great, then you're going to be either ready with dry powder on the side, or you're going to be dollar cost averaging all the way down as it happens. I mean, whichever way that ends up working out, fantastic.
And that's the key is, right, is the only people that don't want to hear that there could be some downside are people that are all in right here. But the key is to always be prepared. And Magic will tell you this as well, is you need to be prepared for anything. You need to be prepared for upside, downside, sideways chop. What are you doing in those scenarios? And so if it does flush down, well, for me, all right, I'm just inching in every, let's say, a few $1,000s I'll accumulate as long as my thesis holds. And my thesis is that it is the future digital gold. It's something that can't be printed. I mean, all my thesis continues to remain the same for the long term. So what do I care if in the next year it goes to 10, if I'm just going to use that as an accumulation period for when it goes to 200, right?
Yeah, if ultimately your game plan's anything like mine, this is a long-term game for a long, long time to come of accumulation of the asset that is Bitcoin to help myself and my family create the financial freedom that I believe can come from it. And then obviously it's, our future as it relates to finance as well. Blockchain is here. It's not going anywhere. And I think we're going to continue to see that growth. Speaking of growth, Magic. Everybody's been talking about, what do you know? XRP. So XRP fam, put them up. Smash that like if you like XRP. Smash the like if you hate XRP. We just want you smashing the like. But I'm curious, Magic, you've obviously traded XRP quite a bit in and out. And what are you seeing right now with XRP? Are the people looking for some upside? We're gonna see $1 soon. What are your thoughts?
No, man, you're gonna put me on the spot like that. My my analysis on XRP has actually not changed in almost a year now. We were looking for the 3-month here at 95 cents. We've covered that on your channel before based on a pattern. And now you just need to go ahead and start establishing where is my big support for this asset. And I believe it was underneath this one. What is this? Oh, this is Bitstamp. I need to go to the Bybit chart. That's why we're on the wrong one. There we go. So establishing exactly where I need to see holding is going to be pretty key for this asset. So on this move up, this giant candle, a lot of people refer to these as inefficiencies. I've seen people call them fair value gaps. I've seen people call them just volume gaps, whatever it is. The technical term for it is a single print. Basically, it's just increasing volume. There's really no transactions going on here. They're seeking out the next seller, essentially. So price is accelerating pretty quick. They create this zone that has to be defended by the trend if the trend is going to continue. So if you lose that area, there's nothing there to really prop you up. There's no past transactions to fall back to. So if you fall through it, usually it's a pretty quick move. And right off of the top, you've come back and you've now tested it. You're testing it again. So straight away, this low here at 67 cents, if it gets taken, it does need to be reclaimed immediately. If it's living inside of this, you will see this fill. In fact, that's what we just did on Bitcoin in this most recent rise up yesterday, where we had that move up. That was actually a single print fill all the way up to, I believe it was like 29,700 or so, give or take. So for me, if you're going to see any kind of a move up, you have this level at 82.87 cents. That's going to be your resistance that, if broken, I would expect to see probably a new high in that attempt at $1. And the dollar is significant, one, because it's a psychological number. Everyone thinks of $1 when they think of XRP now because, whatever reason. And then also it was your yearly pivot from the prior session. So it was the average of price for an entire year at one point. So there's a lot of transactions that's gone on there. And then the volume point of control is $1.09. So $1.09 for all price action is just the overall, VPOC. So it is a target as long as you're in the range. So losing the single print at 67 cents isn't a death sentence. It actually only goes down to 58, which is not only the value area low on a macro scale, but comes into that Q1 low that's been defended so well off the lows. So if I was looking to load up on XRP, I'm either playing a very strong reaction off of this level, or I'm waiting for 58 to 54 cents to see if I can get a trade there. I'm not really interested in buying anywhere else or interacting with the chart anywhere else because on a run like that, and it's nothing personal. It's nothing personal to the army, but like they're known for putting in very large bottoms, which they certainly did here. This is a huge structure. Yeah. And then you think, oh, I'm going to get continuation. No, massive move up. And then it just gives it all right back. So historically, this has been a pump and dump chart, for lack of a better term. Nobody likes to use those terms on an asset that people are fond of, but you got to protect yourself in this case. So for me, I've taken some profits up here. I think 87 cents was my last take profit. I still have some of that position open, but I'm not going to be adding any positions or looking to add any leverage on this unless it hits an area and I see the reaction I want. So kind of a boring thing for the XRP army. I'm sure they're not used to too much TA on it, but
hey, it is what it is. You can't, just manipulate and pull it out of thin air like the $589 or the $50,000 or the $10,000. I'm obviously being a smart ass about it because I'd love to see XRP at those numbers because I hold a bunch of it. But I'm of the belief that this is going to be like any other asset. It's going to make some moves just like any other asset. It might have some huge moves with related news, whatever. But as you guys saw, they effectively win the lawsuit, or somewhat anyway, and it makes a big move, huge move, but not like what people have been talking about. So we'll keep an eye on XRP for you. That's obviously something that's always hot topic for the crypto space. All right, so Gareth, I know that you are on a little bit of a time crunch, so I want to ask you a fun question, okay? And I actually want to tie it together. So the DOJ was dropping a charge against SBF, and the charge was unlawful campaign contributions. So kind of a dual part question here. First of all, is this a coincidence as we move into the beginning stages of a presidential campaign? Is it to protect someone? And then the second part of the question is, who do you think is the favorite? It doesn't need to be your favorite, but who do you think is the favorite for this upcoming presidential election?
Wow. So in terms of the campaign contributions, I just think, who knows if there's an ulterior motive there? To be honest, I wouldn't know. I think from what I heard, he donated to both sides. So it could just be like, this is a waste of money. The major charge that's going to put him behind bars for 20, 30, maybe his life is going to be the fraud and everything else he's done. Yeah. So it also could be just saying, why are we going to pursue this? What's if you illegally contribute to a campaign, what do they do? Throw you on probation or some crap, maybe a year in jail.
Right.
So that could be part of it. Or maybe they just don't want to, the politicians on both sides, they don't want to air their dirty laundry. Who knows? But I think what it comes down to again is that, it's in terms of the elections, it's a tough one, man. I think there's people that, I honestly don't like either of the main candidates, to be honest. I just don't. I think they're too old. I would like to see fresh young blood, someone that mirrors the growing demographic of the U.S. as the baby boomers begin to pass away. And nothing against baby boomers, the great generation, right? But yeah, you just need fresh blood, and I think crypto wants that too. Like you can't expect, and this by the way, this went with legalization of marijuana too. Is like the Democrats were generally for legalization of marijuana on a federal basis, and then Biden comes in and he's like 80 plus years old, and he's like, oh, but it's a gateway drug, and it's gonna this and that. And it's like yeah, that was the old way of thinking. You got to bring in the new than new blood. So to be honest, I don't know. I hope someone new emerges. That's all I could say.
Hoping someone new emerges. Yeah, we have seen each candidate with their own talking points, but crypto has been a big part of that. Gareth, I'm going to keep going with magic here for a minute, but brother, thank you very much for coming on. Crypto fam, if you're not already following Gareth Soloway, his link is down below the video, so make sure to be following him. And Gareth, we look forward to having you on soon.
Dude, thank you so much. It's honestly been a great conversation. Thank you so
fantastic.
much, Magic. Good seeing you, buddy.
We'll see you soon.
Too.
Take care.
All right, so that was almost knocked Magic off too, and just knocked the whole show off. It's the Keeper Show today. So good to see Gareth. As always, he's freaking fantastic. People love to listen to him. And I'll tell you what, dude, he's been so accurate on like a macro scale, like a lot for some time. And I know a lot of people have made a lot of money listening to him, just like people in your Discord have made a lot of money listening to you. It's not because you're giving them financial advice. You're just saying, hey, I've been doing this a long time. Here's what I'm seeing. Do with it what you will. So I want to ask you the same question though, Magic. I know you don't like to get too political either, but I'm just curious. Do you, let me pose yours a little bit differently. I'll ask the first part the same. Who do you think is the favorite? Doesn't mean to be your favorite, but who do you think is the favorite in this upcoming election? My second question is, who would actually be best for the crypto space?
Who do I think the favorite is right now? I think it's still Joe Biden, isn't it? Isn't he the favorite on the Democrat side? That he's the incumbent.
I'm just asking what your
but
thoughts
in terms of who would be best for crypto, I mean, it's clearly RFK because he's all about it, But I do think
bought his kids 14 Bitcoin, actually. All 7 of his kids, 2 Bitcoin apiece. So
so it's one of those things where do I think that if we're going strictly off of I'm only voting off of one issue, and it's someone's policy on Bitcoin, you're probably going to vote for Kennedy. You're definitely not going to vote for Biden in that administration because they've they've kind of really
screwed the pooch.
Yeah, they don't like it too much. But if I was thinking on that in that party, because most people don't realize when I went to college, when I was for political science, I actually enjoy politics quite a bit. I just usually don't share it publicly,
I like to push you a little bit. So
I like Andrew Yang a lot. I did last cycle, mainly because I just thought he was very intelligent. He had some out of the box ideas. I don't agree with everything he said. You're never going to. And he has some very fundamentally flawed opinions. But at the same time, so did the other candidates. So for me, I was like, I think this guy would put the best interest out there for the public and would listen to feedback and try to work with people. Also, he was very pro crypto. So like to me, it was attractive in that regard. But on the Republican side, I'm a little torn because I would like to kind of like Gareth. I want to see some younger blood come in. Like I'm not too fond of the idea of re-electing Trump, which I know is a controversial thing to say because a lot of people love the guy. But it was one of those things where I'm not going to sit up here and say I'm a Trump hater because there's a lot of people that just hate on him to hate on him. I just didn't think he did as good a job as people thought he did. I think that the media makes things look the way they are. And what happened was a lot of people got isolated in their opinions, and that's how he got elected. We isolated an entire faction of people in this country. And then when voting season came around, they all showed up. It was one of those things where it definitely happens. And they were pretty fed up after, I think, 8 years of policy change that was getting pushed through before that. So that, and he ran against a weak candidate. I mean, you ran against Hillary Clinton. Nobody was going to vote for her. Well, people did, but
she all but called. I remember it. They were having a celebration party for her.
I remember
when things went south. That was
like one of the most
wild.
hated candidates that you could have put out there, I think. And they, then they were on Trump, also another hated candidate for the other side. So it was kind of this like, who do we hate less? So I'm a little torn on it. I don't know what we're gonna get. Personally, I'm with Gareth. I would like to see people our age, same with you, like get in there and kind of voice those opinions, because our generation is going to face different struggles and morals and values than generations of past. It's unfair to live by those standards as things are evolving. But I also do want somebody that's going to protect freedoms for Americans. They're not going to take away things that are, I feel like God-given rights, so to speak, for lack of a better term. So it's a tough one, man. I don't know that we have a good moderate candidate. It's been a while. Everyone's so divided.
I have one so I've only listened to piece parts, so I have not dove into this. So let me be clear with everybody. I have just heard some really good, now they're politicians, so there's always talking points, but I have heard some really good talking points that I personally like from Ramaswamy, I think is how you say.
That's what Matt just put in the chat too. Yeah.
Oh, I see it. He says Ramaswamy is rising the polls. I have heard some really good stuff from him. I would consider myself a libertarian. I just want the government to stay out of my freaking business and allow me to be free and operate my own business and do my thing, right? Make our money, do our thing, live life and enjoy life. That being said, I definitely, and all of you, any of you that watch my TikTok know that I lean right. And I lean right probably pretty hard. But ultimately, what I'm looking for is someone, like you said, that's balanced. And I feel like I hate the fact that it seems to be always talking points where they say all of these things and then have no ability to get it done or just don't do it. They flat out lied to you, right? The other thing that's tough is because of how our government is set up, let me backtrack a little bit. We have an issue in Ohio that's getting ready to come up, and it's issue 1. And let me just ask you on this, Magic. There's a really interesting way like to think about this. And I'd love to hear from the chat what you think on this. So there's issue 1. An issue in the state of Ohio, it has always just been a majority rules to pass something through the House. Okay. Issue 1 now if you vote yes for issue 1, the way I understand it anyway, is that if you vote yes for issue 1, that you are voting that it now needs to be a 60-40 split. You have to have at least 60% to push something through. So I was talking with my dad last night and I was like, what the heck am I voting for this? Because let's look at it. 60-40 split. To me, in my mind, it sounds great from a standpoint of, well, there's a couple different things. I feel like things continue to get a little bit more crazy and liberal as we go. Like things are just pushing that line further and further. So I like the idea of making it really hard to get something passed through. My dad brought up a really good point, though. Well, 2 of them, really. He said, first of all, you should look in to see who sponsored the actual bill. See who actually drafted up and is pushing this bill. Okay, cool. Was it Republicans? Was it Democrats? Who was it? Whatever, cool. But he said the other problem is if you go away from a majority's rule to a 60-40, you got to look at the other side, too. The other side can literally block you with way less than favorable conditions on anything that gets pushed through. And for me, like I said, I lean right. Most of the constitutional type bills that are pushed up come from Republicans. So I'm interested. What are your thoughts? Like, do you like the idea of a 60-40 or you like the idea of just majority rules?
I would prefer majority rules personally. I don't think that we should have to put a quantifiable number on a vote. That seems a little asinine to me, but I would kind of just want to know like why, like what's the purpose of this bill? Like who, kind of like you said, who sponsored it, but realistically, what was the catalyst to get this done? Is there something going on that they don't like? And so they're like, okay, let's do it this way now because we're not getting what we need. So there's needs a little context, but at the same time, like just off the bat, it's kind of like you said, you were just talking about like one side could then just block people from getting things done. And that's one way to look at it too, but it's also another way where if one party really kind of gets a foothold in that state, they can just kind of run things. You turn into California very quickly. Is how I would look at that. So
I just think it's gonna be really, really interesting, and we'll get off the politics topic, but I know you guys come here for crypto, but I just think it's gonna be really interesting because I don't think that most people, when they vote on stuff like this, have a fundamental understanding of what they're truly voting for and don't really dive deep into it. I do because I like the politics side of things. It's something, Crusaders always call me politics keeper or whatever, I like that side of things, but I think a lot of people don't. And that's kind of an ambiguous like idea where it's like, well, it could go this way if it's 60-40, but it could go this way if it's 50-50, or you know what I mean, majority rules. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. But the presidential election coming up, very interesting. Make sure to smash that like. Tell us in the chat before you take off, who's your favorite candidate? Obviously, we're doing all TA stuff for the most part, but wanted to throw in just a little bit of fun stuff. I saw that SBF was that they were dropping one of the charges. I was like, you know what? Let's ask a little politics today. So let me ask you this, Magic, to kind of round out the show. What would you tell? Again, it's TA Thursday around the charts. Do you have anything in particular that you really want to remind people about as we kind of look at the macro situation with the markets that's going on right now that you want to remind everybody, even if you touched on already? Is there something you really want to remind people about what's going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time to get involved. And I know that's one of those things where everyone's always going to say, oh, don't get involved right now. We might be on a downturn. But when I say get involved, it's a great time to really just be watching what's going on and taking in the information. Doesn't mean you have to actually act on it right away or, you know, put your money on the line, but you can certainly glean quite a bit from just watching this. Getting differing opinions is always good as well. You know, don't just come to TA Thursday and be like, I'm only going to listen to Magic. You know, go to places like the Gareth Soloways. You know, I can't remember, you know, Bill Noble was on here.
Yep.
We've got all kinds of different opinions and ideas that are out there. And it's your job to decipher, which is really easy to do, you know, which one's going to be correct because you're going to get to watch it play out. You know, so keep track of these things and then figure out how that you can implement this and what it's going to do for you as an investor or a trader or whatever it is. And kind of like I said earlier, figure out which one of those hats you're wanting to wear. Some people wear all of them, which I wear a little bit of all of them. But if you're wanting to be more of a trader, then you got to dial in and say, okay, I'm going to be this kind of a trader. Yeah. And you know, I need to find it, not necessarily the edge. Once you find your edge, it's finding that set of rules that makes your edge applicable and then sticking to it. You know, discipline's the big thing. So
it's all about game plan, man. I've heard you guys say it time and time again in different ways. You got to know what you're doing as you get involved. It's not just throwing darts at a dartboard, you know, hey, maybe this will work this time. Maybe this will work this time. It's all about having that game plan. So Crypto Fam, we love you. We appreciate you for being here. Again, you could be anywhere on a Thursday afternoon, but you're hanging out with Debate Crypto. Once again, smash that like, turn on the bell notification if you haven't already. Make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure you're following Magic. Gareth jumped off. Make sure you're following Gareth. We love you guys. Just remember to question everything, trust nothing, and until next time, hodl like it's hot. We will see you soon.